Aloha and welcome everyone to the Ascension Center with TJ Morris and Janet Careless and Teresa. Are you there? Yeah, this is a test run. Well, we're gonna do our hour. This is our first hour, and thank you for joining us, listeners out there. And we're gonna start by going through. I think yesterday we agreed that we're gonna do some of our life story. How did we get here? How did we get here to the Ascension Center, and what is the Ascension Center? And I think we'll probably be able to cover maybe up until our first, I don't know, first 5 years of our lives or something, and just sharing. And we're going to go back and forth and share, what happened that we, when we came into consciousness. Do we remember coming in? Uh, and those type of things. Is that something that you can get behind there, TJ? Oh, that sounds great. Go for it. Right. We were probably in the same group. It was called Your Spiritual Center, and it met on Sundays down in Hilton Hawaiian Village in Waikiki in Honolulu, and it was very exciting. But there were probably 50 to 100 people there, and we came every week, and we just didn't sit beside each other, or maybe even said hi. Maybe we even I just don't remember that level of detail in my life. So maybe we did. What do you think? Yeah. Right. Right. I remember that. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Right. So we were meant to meet. We were meant to meet no matter what. So, but I was painfully shy. I get the feedback from my husband. He met me in '97, and he said you were painfully shy, and that's because I had a lot of abuse in my life. So until I felt really comfortable, I kind of was like the fly on the wall, and I would just go over and meet people here and there. But I was very tiny. I back in '93, I probably weighed 100 pounds. I was very, very tiny, 5'2" and 100 pounds. Yeah, I looked like a little girl. I had no breast. Right. Well, on some level there, and some quantum reality, we did meet, and we did more. We went out and had tea, and went to the movies together. But in that reality, we were about to go in different directions. I have just arrived on the island, and you were about to go on a journey to the mainland, which I don't want to spoil it for our listeners because I read the book. But so that was we have a common path: UFOs and spirituality and Ascension Center, and the the this age that we're dawning into of Aquarius. And so we were bound to meet. And so anyway, we're going to share more about that with our listeners over time, about the synchronicity, and how we were in the same group and didn't quite meet, but on the same path. So what I'd like to do is perhaps to start with our questions. And what I wanted to ask you, TJ, are you ready to start on the questions, or do you have anything else you want to share on the other level? Okay. Yes. Oh, that's when we started. Uh-huh. And that episode is gone. We were trying to find it the other day, and we discovered it accidentally got deleted. So we're starting over. Yes, we will. Oh, I see. I'm not hearing any feedback, and I'm actually broadcasting on my Spreaker.com/Aquarian Radio and blogtalkradio.com/Aquarian Radio for those who are out there. And when we're done, we'll just play them. And you're doing it on blogtalkradio.com/TJ Morris ET Radio. So when we get done, we'll listen. So thank you, listeners, for bearing with us as we try this new system here. And the other thing I wanted to mention before we go into our stories, I hope they can. And we'll find out. Well, that I know that when you Skype in, I know when you Skype in and then you go on to Blog Talk, you can hear both people. But we'll find out. I can hear you, so maybe they can hear you. I can take. Oh, yours is not working. Let me pull that over and look. Yeah, you had problems with that before. But I don't, I'm not the one that they're looking for. You're the one that's been broadcasting. I never get anybody in chat. But you have quite a following here. Let's see, launch the small chat room. Oh, wow. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, right. Uh-huh. Yeah. Right. And well, no. I was just going to say you have ascensioncenter.org. Oh, okay. See, so we're going to cross-link all these things. Right, right. So we'll figure that out. We'll cross-link and add all these people, add all these groups and pages. Yeah. Right. Well, I was gonna have you start because you came into physical form before I did, and so what I was. Well, you're older. You're older than I am. Like what, 2 years, right? 1 year. I'm talking about this incarnation, this the TJ, and that might be confusing to some of the listeners, but we're talking about this level of existence. So in physical form. And so then what happened? What was going on? Yeah, this lifetime. Oh, I think that's Tommy's story. Tommy did that. Not that wasn't me. No, I didn't scoot. I didn't scoot it across the store. No, but that's good. We're getting our stories confused. But so you remember being in the crib? No, no. I'll share mine in a moment. Uh huh. Mhm. Right. I was. Mhm. Oh. Wow. Uh-huh. Oh yeah, I remember those. Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Well, I think I think you were accurate, and do not see. You have your eternal self that you can access as your child. So I was thinking all these very complicated adult terms using complicated language. My voice was still a baby voice, but I had the thoughts, and I remember thinking the thoughts very, very clearly. So if you stop censoring the thoughts and realize that you're a multidimensional being, and yes, you were your eternal self contemplating being a baby, what it was like, how were they responding? So you knew your mother was condescending and she was pretending, and that's cool. You got it. You got that memory thread. Everything you ever witnessed, ever knew, can be accessed. Yes, go ahead. Oh wow. Right. Okay. Oh yeah, I had some very strange memories that I recovered. Well, maybe I recovered just by thinking about these episodes, and I started writing my book. And as I'm writing my book, these different episodes come to me. So I remember some. I remember very young. I remember I pooped my pants, and it woke me up, and I said, "Oh, this is disgusting. I am never going to do that again." So I'm not sure how young I was, but getting the feedback from my parents is that I was potty trained pretty early on, maybe around 1 year of age or something, or right under a year. So I must have been totally disgusted by it that I decided to break that habit. But that was when my eternal self anchored and realized I'm in this baby form and I'm here for good, and I've got to do something about this business that's coming out of my rear end. So that was one thing. I remember standing up. I was struggling and struggling, and I was like in my baby self during the struggle, and then I finally stood up. So I don't know how old babies are when they finally stand up, but I was pretty average development. I was only about 6 pounds something, and I was the biggest of the three children, and I was the youngest. I had a brother that was 7 years older and a sister that was 5, and you've had both of them on your show. So I stood up and went, oh, and I think I said, oh shit, I'm here again. It was that energy. I swear I said, oh shit, I'm here again. I remember like swearing and realizing I'm back in physical earth form and I'm here again. And then I remembered this one. I remembered, and then I repressed it because it was anchored with trauma. I remember flying. I always flew astrally, but I remember one day, and this sounds so weird, but I'm just going to say it. I'm not going to censor myself. I remembered flying around the room. My mother had put the crib in the dining room. We were raised lower middle class. My dad was a mailman. He didn't make very much money. We were in a deep struggle. My mother did not work outside of the home. And so we had no heat in the second floor of our house. We had space heaters, but there was no, the furnace did not reach the second floor. We're talking the 50s in Pennsylvania, and they had some pretty harsh winters. So my mother put the crib near where the pipe ran through the wall, because that wall would get really warm so that the heat would radiate and keep me, the baby, warm. So she had to, we had, it wasn't coal, it was electrical, I think, or, it was gas, okay, it was gas. So then I was flying around the room, and I would go around the room, and I'd plop back on into the bed, into the crib. Oh, before that, my mother would go into the kitchen, and she had one of those crank washing machines that you rolled up to the sink, and she would once a week just do all the family laundry, and she would hang it up in the kitchen. There were these pipes in the ceiling. Very old house, 1840s farmhouse, and it never got remodeled. And so she would just literally hang them on these pipes that ran across the ceiling, and hang up all our laundry, and it would dry inside because there was nowhere to put it, and she didn't have a dryer. Or she had a dryer, she didn't want to use it. She was a Depression era baby, and she was a child, and she was terrified of running out of money and running up bills. So she didn't want to run up a bill with a dryer, so she would just hang it up. So she was out there, and she would get very wrapped up in what she was doing. So I was playing fly around the room and plop into the bed, and I was not doing it astrally, I was doing it physically. And about the third or fourth time, I started getting, children like to play, so I started laughing, and I was getting really loud with my laughter. And she came in and she saw me, and she screamed, and I never did that again. I didn't even do it I didn't even like do it behind her back. I just never did that again. So years later, I was at a conference, and a man came up, and took the mic, was asking the speaker on the stage a question, but then he said, I want to tell a story. So he told a story how he used to fly around the orphanage, and he was very ornery, and he kept flying until he was about 2 years old, maybe 3, and then finally he quit doing it because the nuns beat it out of him. He said, does anybody here at the conference remember flying, physically flying? We're not talking astral, but physical. He said, if you do, meet me at the back of the room. So his saying it in front of this large group of about 1,000 people, at that point I went, oh yeah, I remember that. And I went to the back of the room, and there were 13 or 14 people back there. And we all remembered flying when we were children, and it was physical, not astral. So I had sort of like verification on that. So go back to my childhood. The other thing I remember very clearly was I had friends in my bedroom at night. They would come and look over me, and I would communicate. So I'm familiar with the friends. I don't have quite the detail if it was one friend. I think it was different people would come. I get that they were from the Federation of Planets, something like that, because they were just watching over me. And the other thing is that I could see ghosts. So sometimes these interdimensionals, I don't think they were demonics, but I think they were actually discarnate beings. One identified as my great-grandmother, my mother's grandmother, who died in the house. Another one I identified was my mother's mother, who died of a large football-sized tumor in her stomach, and her I guess it was they didn't operate in time, so it grew really huge. And my mother was pregnant with me, and she didn't tell her mother about the baby, me. So my grandmother was curious about me, so she would stand at the foot of my bed. So I'd always see this woman, and it wasn't until years later when my mother showed me a picture. I was probably 5 or 6, and then I realized, oh, that's the woman that stands at the foot of my bed. So I was getting older. I was about between a year and 18 months, I want to say, and I was in my bedroom upstairs, so it must have been getting warmer, so she put me upstairs, and I was once again still in the crib, and one night all these beings came around me. It was like they were 360 all around me, and I would just turn my head and look at these beings, and they would rotate and come into the first row of looking at me, and they would allow me to look into their eyes. And when I looked into their eyes, I saw deep into their souls, and I was just crying with joy, seeing endless beings, and they were all sentient, conscious life forms, and they said, we come to say goodbye. You've got to go be human now. And so that was my agreement, my karmic agreement before I came in to go to do what I'm doing now. And there was this when they left the room, there was like this loud crack of the loudest thunder you could ever imagine. It was like it hit something. I think it was just thinking about it. I think it was just the dimensions closed, the door closed, and it was a loud crack. And then I started crying, and everything I was saying was coming out baby talk. So I think I scared my mother when I was younger, and I was talking way beyond my years. But I kept thinking in this eternal adult self. But then I started to become more and more unconscious about that, and more acclimated into being a human being. And so, but that was, she came in and picked me up when I was just trying to explain to her what had happened, and she couldn't understand, and I realized it was just coming out gobbledygook, and I started crying in frustration, and she thought I was crying because I was scared. I wasn't scared at all. I'd been blissed out. So that's my early memories. Anything else you want to share? Let's say from 1 to 3. Any other memories that are sparked by this conversation on your end? All right. To say the least. Well, okay. So then next, I'd like to go. Well, I don't know if you had it. I don't know your history. So, have you had things from like from age 3 to let's say 8 or 6 or something? What time period would you like to cover next? Right, not at that young age. Annette Funicello. So you were an only child? I thought you had a sister. Didn't you have a sister? You said. Oh, okay. Uh huh. Ah, Oh, wow, really? I haven't watched it. Uh-huh. Right, yeah, right. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, just like your picture. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Right. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. You're not from here. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh. Uh-huh. Oh. Yeah, you can't. You're a little kid. Get a refund. Wow. Up there. Right. Oh my God, that's wonderful. Mm-hmm. Well, that's fascinating because I think you're right. They make contact to let you know who you are. So mine happened when I was 4 years old. It was 1958, and I was out playing in the yard, and there were buttercups growing. So it was probably springtime, and there was a little fence on the side of the yard that was just about foot high because my mother put it there just to keep people from going on that side of the yard. It wasn't like a real barrier, but it was just like, don't go on this side of the yard, you can go on the other side of the yard, because the kids kept cutting through our yard to go to school and to go swimming, because the way it was constructed is our house was at the bottom of a big hill, and there was anyway, there were a bunch of people lived between us and the boulevard, which was over by the train tracks, and by the river, and by uh, and all this traffic. So these kids, instead of going all the way down and around, walking around, they cut through our yard. And my mother let them, but she said only if you cut through the left side, and so there was a path going through the left side of the house. So I was on the other side, privileged because I was a daughter, and in the grass, and I started to step over this little barrier. You've got mail. And I had buttercups and all kinds of flowers, and I was a very neat child. I remember, it's interesting. I think these epiphany experiences, you remember all the tiniest detail. So it was a very bright, sunny day. It was perfect weather because it wasn't too hot, wasn't too cold. The sun was on my face, and I had picked these flowers, and I was very neat. So I put them so they were all, the same size up above, and I trimmed the bottom so it was all even, best I could with my little fingers, and I made this nice little bouquet, and I was going to take it into Mommy, because I love my mommy. And I had discovered somebody talking about God, the concept of God, and I took that in the conversation, and I was out singing these made-up songs, these nonsense songs to God, and I was just full of the idea of spirituality because I knew that, and so I was happy. Oh, these people are understanding, spirituality, and so next thing I know, I'm in a ship. Now, the ship was, people always say nuts and bolts stuff. Well, what did it look like, and this and that. The ship was a construct co-created by our minds, so it would appeal to the 4-year-old human self that I was, so she had some referential points, something she could relate to, right? So the ship wasn't really necessary, but for this meeting, the minds that were gathered there created this ship for me, and I was actually part of that creation because I am simultaneously my eternal self and my 4-year-old human self. But at that point, once I was on board ship, I remembered who I was, but I was still human. So I knew my eternal self. So they constructed a theater, and I hadn't been to any movies at that point. Shortly after that episode, I was going to go to a movie. But at that point, in those days, you didn't really take your children to a movie theater because children fuss, right? So if Mom and Dad were going to go to the movies, they left you home with a babysitter. So I hadn't been to the movies yet, and so I sat down, and this big screen started showing a side view of the Earth, and there were 3 beams that came into the center of the Earth from a different direction, and it blew to smithereens. And then the image faded, and another view of the Earth, and there was a lot of destruction, but there was still life. And another scene, it faded, and another scene showed more life and less destruction. There were 24 scenes of the multiverses, the future potential histories of the planet called Earth. And there were several, very high utopian, I would call them utopian realities. And the communication was telepathic, but it wasn't really a language or words. It was concepts. So we would just think things and understand a whole paragraph or a whole book of words just in a concept. So they were asking me, which one do you choose? And as they were asking me that, I realized that if I chose, I was choosing for all of existence. So it was very bizarre because there's a part of me that centered it and questioned it and went, what? I'm just a little girl. How can this be happening? And the other part of me had the awareness that, yeah, they're all multiversers, and that I am, it's that observer-participant factor that they're discovering in quantum physics that, nothing happens unless you're observing it. So I'm observing it, so of course I could choose. And so I chose a timeline. And so shortly after that choice, it was like instantaneously, I was back on the Earth, reanimating my form. Like I was back in the position that I'd left, with my foot in the air. And the sun had been very bright. It was high noon when I left, but the sun was setting and the sky was full of brilliant colors. It was absolutely gorgeous. And the communication continued, and I was looking skyward, heavenward, and they said, you've come to do something which will be very important. It's going to benefit all of humankind, and we will communicate when it's time. And at that point, I still had an awareness that I could not go in and have this conversation with these people, my parents or my family, because they wouldn't be able to receive it. So I kept it to myself. But I felt so elated. And around that time, within a few days of that, I did ask my mother if I could go to church to see God, because I started setting into my baby self again, my intellect, because there's different. Oh, we're gonna have to wrap this up. We did it, an hour. Yeah, so I just say I ended up going to Sunday school, and let me just finish that. Went to Sunday school, and of course God wasn't there. The person I saw that I thought was God wasn't there, but my mother said they wanted you. You're only 4 years old. I said go ahead and ask, and they did. So I think that was an intervention. They let me. Okay, final words. Go ahead, TJ. 60 seconds. Okay, and yes, thank you for joining us. Do look at our various websites. Mine is ascensioncenter.net, TJ's ascensioncenter.org. I also will put this on Aquarian Radio. And thank you, aloha.com. Okay, centerorg.com. All right, well, thank you. Talk to you then. Aloha, love, and blessings. Okay, bye-bye. Love and light. Good night.